Thank you, Spirit of God. We are so ready, so receptive to enter into this place of encounter with you. Glory. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen tonight, but I'm excited. I think what we're going to sense, and what I sense is going to be the culmination and the conclusion, what I hope you get at the end, is just this deep, deep invitation to participate with God in creating the meaning of your life. Invitation to co-create with Him. I think many of you have grown up in a faith community, and I think most of us are, and sorry that I just jump into it, but I'm so excited about the message. I don't want to tell you a little bit too much about us. That's kind of, we might have videos about that, but maybe I'll give just a short. Just Marianne and myself, we met when we were 18, fell madly in love, got married 3 months later. I wanted to make it 3 weeks, but it was 3 months. And we just headed off into Africa, began mission work in the neighboring countries there. 2010, we lived in England at that stage, and our hearts was just to go again. Our kids were kind of going to college and university at that stage. And we thought, let's just go again. And we didn't know what that would entail. But basically what happened is we just got rid of all our stuff until we could carry all our belongings. We hit the road, and we were on the road for 6 years. So this 10-week tour is such a breeze. And then about a year ago, we found a base in Hermanus, South Africa, and we still travel, but at least we have a base, which is great. And so that's as much introduction as you need. Let's get to the beautiful stuff. Many of you would be familiar with the metaphor of God as a plan for your life. Have you heard that before?
Oh, yes.
That's one of the ways in which we've related to God. And tonight, I want to introduce another metaphor that might be contradictory in many ways. Ooh. But hey, if I just came here to tell you stuff you already know and agree of, what use would that be? So I want to, and there's, I'm not here to just dish the plan metaphor. There's beautiful things about the plan, Jeremiah 29:11, I know that, or 11:29, I know the plans, the thoughts I have for you, plans to give you a future and a hope. And we can all identify anyone who's had children. You've got good intentions for your children, and you would make whatever plan to support them. But can you imagine if I look at my 2-year-old and say, you're going to be a dentist, and I'm going to make all the plans, and your only contribution is to discover my plan and submit to it. And can you see how my good intentions can very quickly become overbearing manipulation? So maybe along that way, he says, I want to be an artist. What would be very good for our relationship is for me to say, I support you in that. Let's make these plans together. Do you see that? So the metaphor that I want to contrast plan to is the metaphor of story. Now, the best plans have got very few surprises, but the best stories have got many surprises. If you've ever gone to a movie and in the first 5 minutes you know the whole plot, You know the good guys, the bad guys, and you think, who bothered? I mean, we're creating this. What a boring plot. The best stories are those that surprise you. In fact, psychologists link joy to surprise. Okay, so the best stories are those that astonish you, that confuses you a little bit along the way, and only at the end do you understand the meaning of the beginning. Hey? So the best plans have got few surprises. The best stories have got many surprises. The best plans wants to control and limit your future to a predetermined track. The best stories unfold spontaneously. What else? If we look at the metaphor of plan and we push that metaphor too far, it brings us to a place where we adapt an attitude of we just need to find God's plan and submit to it. And you know what? There's very little room for creativity in that. But if life is a story in which God invites you to co-author and co-create with him, wow, does that change things? Because you see, in the plan paradigm, if things go a little bit wrong and trauma strikes, one of two things is happening. Either the person making the plan is not that good at making plans, or he's a bit sadistic, but we normally opt for the second one. We missed the plan. Hey. Somewhere we missed the plan, and that's why things aren't as perfect as we expect them to be, and immediately there's that condemnation. Something wrong happened. I must have stepped out of the plan. How do I get back into that plan? So the plan metaphor leaves a lot of room for insecurity. Whenever things aren't quite the way they should be, is God still with me? Or has things happened because he's with, or I've walked out under the umbrella or done something that have allowed negative things into my life? Now, in the story paradigm, there's a different way of interpreting it. Because in the story paradigm, I can conclude that they are, in the best stories, sometimes have a chapter that ends in tragedy. But it's not the end of the story. There might be a chapter in which things are confusing, but it's not the end of the story. And so tonight, that's just a quick little introduction into a path that I want to take us on over the next 2 nights of how do we participate with God in creating the beauty and meaning that is possible for our lives. In other words, instead of seeing God as the architect that stands at the beginning of your life with a blueprint in his hand, immovable, waiting for you to get with the plan, instead of that picture, I think Jesus introduces us to a God. He says, my Father, with him all things are possible. In other words, he is the infinite possibility standing in front of us, inviting us to realize the possibilities of meaning and beauty. Now, we have often constructed the God of absolute certainty instead of the God of infinite possibility. And you can never reduce possibility to certainty. If something is possible, it's not certain. And if something's certain, it's not possible. Fun. So let me start with a story to maybe just introduce this idea of how we participate in creating beauty and meaning. During the 6 years of Marianne and myself just going, we were all over Europe, America, the UK, and in one of our trips we landed in South Africa. And friends of us invited us to a piano recital. And it was a beautiful summer's evening, and we arrived at the host's home, which was on the rugged coast. We walked into this mansion. What caught my attention first was just the beautifully artistic display of artwork everywhere. I love art, so was drawn to that, but suddenly something else lured me. Magnificent mountains, the evening sun, there was these massive lounge doors, and this beautiful scene just streamed in. So we walked out to the patio, and it was breathtaking. In the one corner, like an elegant lady waiting for a date, stood this grand piano. And Stefan, who studied at many of the masters in Europe, came out. He took his place at the piano. And everyone found their place. The chatter quieted down, and a new sound filled the air. It was as if the breeze just joined in, and the rhythmic movements of the waves just added to the rhythm. The colors became audible as they skipped across the ocean. And all of this just mounted to create a moment of beauty. And suddenly I realized that what gave the music was unfolding something that was present everywhere. The mystery found a voice. And I realized that what gives this particular note its significance is all the notes that came before it. And it's not even that I just remember the sounds or the notes that came before. It's almost like the revelation of sound that came before still resonated within this note. It was the summary, it was the conclusion of all that came before. But it was more than just a summary, it was an anticipation of what's about to come. The present is pregnant, a testament to its intimate past and a glimpse into a future of possibilities we have not imagined yet. And so in that moment of that present moment that was vibrating with meaning and with potential, I suddenly realized to what extent our consciousness gives meaning to our experiences. Your consciousness, in part, constructs your reality. Okay? You see, maybe things do exist without you being conscious of them, but they do not exist in the same way. You see, those mountains, those rhythmic waves, the sun beams as the sun was setting, the sound, all of that was brought together uniquely within consciousness. And they would not have the meaning they had if we weren't given the opportunity to participate in creating its meaning. Can you see that? And so what makes those moments so enchanting is that it offers an invitation for us to participate, an invitation for us to become co-creators. See, creation is not just something that happened a long time ago. And now God sits back all bored. No, the Creator is the one who continually finds his expression within your creativity. Okay? And so the way in which we are conscious can either enrich our moment or impoverish our moment. And there's a way within our religious systems, and you have undoubtedly encountered this kind of spirituality that I think is a spirituality that impoverishes reality. And that's the kind of spirituality in which obviously the pains and disappointments, the sufferings of life can sometimes become overwhelming. And so spirituality for people that are in that moment of suffering can easily become just a desire to escape, a desire to deny reality, or a desire to escape reality. And so for them, salvation is, Jesus, please come quickly. This is such a mess. How long must we endure it? Let's just get out of here. Now, that is not the spirituality I'm going to be exploring in the next 2 days. I want to explore what I think Jesus introduced us to, and that is a spirituality with which we can enrich this moment, in which we can participate in unfolding the beauty of what's possible for your life. I think that is one of the most shocking messages of Jesus as he walked amongst a people with such expectations of, come, take us out, get us out of this mess. That he would come and he'd say, you know, you need to change your mind. God's kingdom is here. And it is now. It reminds me of Paul in 2 Corinthians 5:18. He has this experience of the meaning of what Christ expounded. And in that verse he makes this astounding declaration. He says, now, all things are of God. Paul, what have you been smoking? There's a lot of things over here that's not really what I would describe of God. You see, there's a place of encounter that allows us to transform our experiences. Paul was not just sitting on a high mountain, unaware of the actual reality of life. You can read that in 2 Corinthians 4 from verse 9-10. He says, we are pressed, from every side, yet not crushed. We are bewildered. We are perplexed. There's things that confuse us, yet it doesn't lead to a place where we just lose hope. So Paul wasn't denying reality, but he found a way in which to transform those very real experiences into something really meaningful and powerful. Now, I use the metaphor of music because, in a way, music has this appeal to every person because it's almost an unformed language. There's something in it that resonates with our hearts, and we recognize its beauty, but we don't know exactly what it means. And it is that enigmatic, that invitation to explore meaning that is not set in concrete yet, that we find so enticing within music. It appeals to that part of us that isn't that well formed yet. That part that is still uninterpreted. That part that is still open for meaning that we haven't decided on yet. Now, from a very early age, we start constructing stories. Just like every note finds greater meaning within the context of the melody, in the same way, our experiences and the events in our lives cries out for context and for meaning. And the way in which we give them greater meaning is we put them in the context of other events and other experiences. And very quickly we begin to construct a story. And humans are beings who search for meaning more than any other creature. I mean, animals, if they have their basic needs met, they've eaten, they've got a place to sleep, they've reproduced, they are satisfied. They don't go and think, how can I explore deeper relationships with those around me? How can I make life more meaning? They just satisfy with, but humans, we will drill through mountains. We will travel as far as, we will send probes into outer space just to find something that adds knowledge, that adds meaning. There's a desire for meaning in human beings. I think it's Robin Keegan in his book, The Evolution of Self, that identifies the pursuit of meaning as the core energy that allows us to develop from one level of consciousness to another. He specifically looks at the child development. But why would there be a pursuit of meaning if there's not firstly a desire for meaning? And that quality deep within us, desire beyond just survival, but desire for meaning, is something that drives us to construct stories from a very early age. Now, when we're little, we still allow experiences to teach us a lot. But it seems like we very quickly fall into a pattern. We build a structure with which we are comfortable, that this is how we interpret our life events. And we do that because we want that structure to help us predict the future. You see, in our pursuit of meaning, humans develop this amazing capacity to perceive reality not as something static, but as a movement that comes from the past and moves into the future. And our consciousness of time have stirred within us this awareness of what's coming, this anticipation. And so we want to be as much in control as we can for what's coming. So if my structure of interpretation can give me correct expectations, and every time an expectation is met, it confirms my structure of interpretation and my story, and the story is gaining confidence. Now, many philosophers and psychologists will tell you that the self you are aware of is, in fact, that process of creating meaning. Okay? To a large extent, you are that meaning-making process. Because subconsciously we ask ourselves, what is it that connects all the events in our lives? What is it that connects all the memories in our experience? And the answer is, there's nothing more central to my memories than the I that remembers them. There's nothing more central to my experiences than the I that experienced them. And so we find ourselves in our stories. And very often when we find ourselves in our stories, the next thing that happens is we find our security in being right about our story. Hey? Have you ever noticed how right you are? I mean, everyone around you might be wrong, but you're still right. And that is, that is natural for this story that has constructed itself to become defensive of the very process and the structures that has brought it into existence. And that continues to sustain it in existence. And so later in life we become so satisfied and so secure in our structure that I can stand here and tell you something exactly the opposite of what you believe. And your mind will take those words, deconstruct them, and reconstruct them to affirm I've always been right. I knew that. And we might have an experience that totally contradicts our beliefs. But we have this ability to again reinterpret the experience until it confirms what I believe. And so to change your mind is the closest thing to impossible I can imagine. But that is what makes this gospel such a gloriously miraculous event. In the midst of our self-assured stories, the gospel is the gloriously good news that you are wrong. That there is so much more to you than the story you have told yourself up to this point. That there is so much more to God than the one that you have become so certain of and so self-assured in. You see, when God reveals himself, it's not to just come and affirm everything you believed so far. Very often that's what we want. No, that's why when Jesus came, I mean, even the religious leaders were quite excited about him in the beginning because he was showing all the signs of the Messiah. There were some miracles. There was some spectacular stuff. Could it be him? But then he started with all these irritating stories in which it's always the people from the other church and the other faith that's the heroes. And so very quickly he became quite a disappointment. Eventually he became a disappointment even to his disciples because of all the messiahs we expected. A dead one was not on the top of the list. And so he doesn't come to just stir up your faith. He comes first and foremost to bring your faith to nothing. He comes first and foremost to make you an atheist in the God of your own making. He comes first and foremost to draw a distinction between your concepts of God and God himself. Because you know what? Your concepts of God is not God. Very often we think it is, and very often we interact with God via our concepts to such an extent that our concepts becomes idols. But God and concepts of God are not the same. And that is one of the most faithful signs that God is busy revealing himself to you, is when your concepts of God are starting to dissolve. God is ready to surprise you, to astonish you, to bewilder you with a reality far beyond the small little boxes of interpretation that we've created for Him. And very often it is our beliefs about God, ironically, that keeps us from experiencing more of God. Very often it's the things that you know about yourself without doubt that is the very construct that keeps you from being all that is possible for you to be. Woo. So what a joy to meet this God of infinite possibility, who's coming to first and foremost bring our constructs, our ideas, our sense of self to naught. Isn't that what Jesus said? If you want to find yourself. I mean, today a lot of religion is about, we're going to help you realize yourself, become yourself, discover that true self and just be it. But actually, Jesus' teaching is always the way of gaining is losing. The way of finding self is losing self. Now, I know how that scripture was presented to me the first time I heard it. You know, if you want to follow me, you need to deny yourself, take up your cross, follow, and if you want to save your life, you've got to lose it. It was presented in such a negative way. It was basically, self is evil, self is bad, self needs to die. Do you remember that kind of religion? Kind of religion that says if you like it, it's probably sin. If you desire it, it's of the devil. Now, it's for very good reason that we rebelled against that kind of religion. And so there's beautiful alternative ways of understanding that scripture. I can't go into the whole passage now, but one of the conclusions I can present to you is maybe that although the self you are conscious of might be good, it's loved by God, and you should love others as you love yourself. It's not the testing of self or evil self. It might be a lot of things good about it, yet that self is not all that God sees in you. And for you to become more conscious of what God is conscious of, those boundaries, because certainty speaks of defined boundaries. This is who I am. This is the self I'm conscious of. For you to become conscious of a different self, you've got to allow those boundaries and those certainties to just give way, to first and foremost lose yourself. It's like falling in love. Now, when I fell in love, I didn't really know myself. For the next few days I fasted without planning it, and for an 18-year-old that was like a miracle, because I ate all the time. But suddenly I couldn't even remember food. I just wanted to know, where's Mary Ann? And that's why they call it falling in love. You don't plan this. You don't walk into it with control. This is a process in which you lose control. It's a confusion. And I remember when I realized what she thinks of me, that she's in love with me. I thought I hit the jackpot. I don't know what she saw, but I'm going to try and keep that up for as long as I can because I'm enjoying this experience. And in the days and weeks that followed, I was like a bit nervous. Maybe she gets to know that real me that is really not as amazing as she thinks. But then after a while, I thought, maybe the me that love knows, maybe that's the real me. Maybe I should allow love to define me. And just drop all those other opinions that's not in line with what love sees. And so our stories develop this certainty. The gospel comes to rattle our stories, to give them a totally different context. And I want to take quick 2 examples to take that a bit further. The first person in the Old Testament that uses the word I in this self-reflective form is Rebecca. Most of the stories about pregnancy are stories about a woman that's barren, that they pray for fruitfulness, and then eventually when it happens, it's a quick end from a happy ending from pregnancy to birth. There's no complications normally, but Rebecca is different. Now, why do I tell this story? Because I want to tap into that part, and I believe this is what God begins to do when He starts deconstructing our certainties. He's taking us back to that part of us that is still unformed, that is still uninterpreted. And all of us, even in our self-assurance and our certainty and our rightness, we are aware that there are other ideas and thoughts that doesn't always line up with our version of the story. And it is that part of us that's still unformed, that is still uninterpreted, that God accesses to help us develop a different story, reinterpret even past stories. Now, there's things that we might have given great value to that really aren't as significant as we made them to be. There are stuff that happened of great significance that we might have completely missed the value of. And it is the Spirit of God that helps us interpret those fragments of messages that still resides there. And Rebecca is the first person that asks, why I? Her pregnancy for her is not the beginning of the end of a happy story. It's the beginning of a new complexity. And the metaphor of pregnancy is such a powerful metaphor of a person who becomes aware of the other within themselves. Because she's no longer just herself, her solid, well-defined me, I'm Rebecca, but there's this awakening of there's something else. There's an other within the self I knows. And it is this, almost this unity and these questions that drives her to God. That makes her seek God. And she says, if this is the case, why I is the most direct translation of the Hebrew. Why? It's an existential question. Why? Some translation says, why do I exist? This is the place where the mirror turns in on itself. See, that's also unique about human consciousnness. Other consciousnesses are aware of what's happening around them. And you can teach many of the great apes an amazing amount of vocabulary. But none of them have yet spontaneously asked, why do I exist? What's the meaning of my life? And that's unique about human consciousness. This process of constructing meaning, this mirror turns in on itself and unfolds an infinite complexity. And so Rebecca asks this question, why I? And God doesn't just give a quick, easy answer of saying, don't worry, don't be confused. But he actually confirms her disunity. And he says, yes, there's two nations raging within you. And the one will serve the other, etc. He confirms that disunity. And so it becomes a question that drives her even further in searching for what do I desire, because everyone thought that once you get pregnant, you've got what you desired. Now move on. But for Rebecca, this just intensifies the question, what do I desire? I'm pregnant, but yet there's this new complexity and I still don't know why I. And that question is actually extended in Jacob. You know, she gives birth to Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau. And you remember Jacob was very close to his mom. Esau was the rough one, very close to his dad. And there's a bit of deception going on with Jacob. Jacob wants with the help of his mom, he wants the rights of the firstborn. And so he goes into the tent as his dad is giving the blessing. And his dad asks this haunting question, who are you? And he asks it again, but who are you? My son, I think he repeats it 3 times. It's such you can see how this question becomes haunting, because then Jacob lies. He constructs a new identity with language. He says, I am Esau. And then he receives the blessing. But you can imagine the confusion within Jacob. Am I Esau? Because I actually said I am, and I received his blessing, and then he falls in love, but instead of marrying the girl he loves, he gets Leah, who's the oldest daughter, who should be married to the oldest son Esau. But you see how his own identity of, am I Esau? Everything in my life is confirming I'm Esau, but I'm Jacob. Who am I? There's this disunity. Until he comes to Bethel. And you see, most of the biblical stories are stories of interpretation. How do we interpret our lives? How do we access that place? And that's why dreams are such an important part of Scripture as well. This is not just something that happens on a conscious level. This is something that accesses the deep, unformed, uninterpreted messages, the subconscious that God helps to construct a new identity. And in Bethel, we know what happens there. He's suddenly away in a dream. He encounters God, but it all happens in the subconscious. He encounters this place in which there is a movement between heaven and earth, and messages, angels are starting to unite all those fragments of messages that he could not interpret. And it's starting to give language to these unformed questions. And when Jacob awakes, he says, God is in this place, and I did not know. There's a beautiful Jewish commentary. It's called the Zohar. The way in which they translate it is like this. It says, God is in this place, in this I did not know. there's a place within you, an eye that you might not be fully aware of, but the eye in which God is so at home, so present. Do you remember that beautiful Old Testament picture of the tabernacle? This skin-covered, mobile dwelling place that becomes illuminated in the incarnation so beautifully when the Word becomes flesh and tabernacles in us. That this is the skin-covered dwelling that God has always desired. That He sees in you an unfolding of a story, of an opportunity for Him to express His own creativity, an opportunity for Him to live, to move, and to have His being. The incarnation, in a way, is God's declaration that I don't want to be God by myself, with myself, or for myself. The only way in which I want to be God is with man, for man, and as man. Meister Eckhart said it this way. He said, if you could truly see right now what makes you, you in the truest, deepest part of you, you would see nothing less than the infinite generosity of God pouring Himself out into your existence. Bonaventure, he made many provocative statements. Maybe I'll just do two of them. The one I really like is he said, God does not exist. Can you believe this monk that devotes his life to God, would start the statement with, God does not exist as a being amongst other beings. Rather, He is the source of all existence. He is what's that circumference? His center is everywhere. God's center is everywhere, and His circumference is nowhere. He's within, but He's not confined. He's without, but He's not excluded. He's above, but He's not aloof. He's below, but He's not debased. He is the all in all. And so what many of these mystics started to see is that human flesh, your life, is where the Word finds expression. In other words, the incarnation is not some once-off unique happening in the person of Jesus. Of course, that was a very unique event. But read verse 13. It speaks about you. It says, you were born, not of the will of man, nor of the will of flesh, but of God. And the thoughts of God became flesh. In other words, God doesn't just think of you every now and then. You are a thought of God made flesh. The Word of God did not become text. The Word of God did not become doctrine. The Word of God did not become institution. All those things have value. But where the Word and the thought and the dream of God finds its most accurate expression is in your consciousness, in your flesh. You are a unique translation of the Word of God. And it's even more accurate than the old King James. He's excited about your life. Ooh, can you sense his invitation? His invitation to, I don't just have a plan that you need to find out and submit to. You are my plan. And if there's any plan, we're going to make it together. Because this is a story. This is a story in which all things are possible. I've not determined your future. I've got some very good ideas. But if there's any plan to be made, we're going to make it together. And we're going to create the beauty and the meaning that is possible. And so what I want to do tomorrow night is we're going to take this one step further. I'm just going to give you a taster. You know the way in which an event in your life finds greater meaning by putting it in the context of a story. Well, your personal story finds greater meaning by putting it into the context of a bigger story, or what I'll call the metanarrative. Now, within the Christian tradition, we've developed a number of interpretations of the metanarrative. But one of the interpretations that I think is one of the most popular and probably most unuseful interpretations of the metanarrative goes something like this. Tell me if you're familiar with it. That there once was a time where everything was perfect. There once was a time where everything was just right. No sickness, no death, no sin. It was paradise. But the two people put in charge of that messed it up so completely that here we are. And we're just hoping that one day that blissful perfection will be our portion again. Are you familiar with that story, with that metanarrative? Basically, what that metanarrative communicates is who you are right now is not really what you should have been. Where you are right now is actually quite a lot less than what it should be. So it starts off with a context of lack. And we can see it in Genesis 3. The human story starts off with humans being so aware of their lack of being. That is what suggests that God doesn't want you to be like him. That's why he doesn't want you to eat this fruit. And in that place of a sense of lack of being, we grasp after every fruit that promises to give us more being. Jesus comes to reverse that story completely. And in Philippians, it speaks about a God who sees such value and beauty in human life that he pours himself out, empties himself into human form, and he does not grasp for equality with God, but he's just completely satisfied being human. Can you see the contrast in these two stories? In one story, humans are so desperate for more being that we try and become more like God. In the other story, God is so excited about your life that he pours himself out into you. In other words, in Jesus, we do not meet a God that says, guys, you need to become a bit more spiritual. You need to ascend to a higher level of spirituality. But rather in Jesus, we meet a God who descends into our humanity and says, I want to be more you. How there's many ways of understanding that statement in the wrong way. I hope you'll understand it in the right way. That the Word seeks to become flesh. That God seeks to find expression for his life through you. I wanted to say one more thing about where we're going. The way in which we put our our stories into the context of a meta-narrative, there's a different way of interpreting the meta-narrative. And that's what we're going to do tomorrow. We're going to reread Genesis 1. And we're going to discover a God who did not just create once a long time ago, but how this Genesis story actually explores the way in which God always creates. And the way in which this God always creates is through participation. Let me give you a taster. For instance, when God wants to make the fish of the sea, He doesn't just do it in a heavenly aquarium and throws it into the sea. But this God speaks to His creation, to the sea, and He says, "Sea, do you know what beauty and life is possible for you? See, won't you bring forth swarming creatures and life?" And the sea brought forth. And in that way, God creates. And so God's creative action within your life is not a situation of you being a dumb puppet that just needs to discover the meaning and the beauty of your life. No, God's participation with you is this invitation that says, if there's going to be any beauty and meaning in your life, it is beauty and meaning that we will co-create, that you are invited to participate in. So we're going to explore that tomorrow. But now, I want to hand over to Mary Ann, and then after that, we'll just enter into conversation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Let's just enjoy this awareness that we are loved, that we are embraced, and that who you are is God's place of encounter. Jesus has a conversation with a Samaritan woman at the well. He was always having conversations with the most unlikely characters and the characters that you shouldn't really have a conversation with. He was always with those that were outsiders. And during that conversation, she says, one day we'll know, the Messiah will come and we'll know all things. And he says, "Woman, you don't have to wait any longer. You don't have to look any further. I am He." And then she says, "What church do you go to?" Us Samaritans worship on this mountain, you Jews on that mountain. And he says, a time is coming where you go to worship will not matter, and how you worship will not matter, because it's who you are that matters before God. And so let's just enjoy the one who's not far, and in this whole story and in your life as you tell your story, that He's not observing from a distance, commenting on your life, but that your life is His plan unfolding and His expression unfolding. That's what
it's foolishness, you say.
through
anticipate.